Anybody got any views on accountability when it comes to disadvantaged students?
Well, I obviously have a lot of views and have written extensively as a critic of the current approach. But let me say something new about like why I think it all happens. I think it happens in part because policymakers and policy lobbyists, people working in think tanks, obviously they care about poverty, but they also kind of understand what poverty is and they think it's something that they can say something about. And so I think that's why they use it as a policy direction. But ultimately, like if you are a teacher in the classroom, what matters is low attainment. Like what matters is students who don't know your subject and are struggling to learn it. And that's like the social gradient that we operate on in education. There are the students who are learning really well and there are students who are not. And that's not the same thing as the children who happen to come from poor households, who may or may not come from households who are highly motivated to help their children learn, who are reading at home with them. They may be very high attainers. They may be all kinds of things, but they uniquely don't have a common set of educational needs. And so as a narrative, it's like deeply unhelpful for schools to focus on this group because they are a group of children who are not the same as each other in terms of their educational needs. But we're sort of asked to do it. And then therefore we're asked to do the impossible. And what happens when we're asked to do the impossible is we keep reinventing stupid things, like putting stickers on the books that are different colours, and asking certain kids to answer questions first or sit in certain places in the class based on something that doesn't have anything to do with how effectively they're going to learn the subject. And so I think that's why you just see this invention and reinvention. You know, nobody wants the social gap to be there. But just because the social gap is there, it doesn't mean it's like the instrument by which like schools can have a productive narrative about what's wrong in our schooling system. And I think it just allows other like stories to not happen. Like there's a set of kids who arrive at secondary school having got, you know, like 20% or 30% in their maths sat. So they haven't mastered the maths curriculum at primary school. And then they enter secondary school. And we know very little about their backstory of their educational needs and how they got to the point where they couldn't do any maths. And then they sit in these classrooms and they continue to not do any maths and not really get better at maths. And like it's like an absolute national crisis. And yet we all spend our time worrying about like the pupil premium, which is also like a crisis, but it's not an educational crisis that we can fix. But we could have a big national conversation about fixing bottom set maths. Like we could do it, but we don't, do we? Because like it's for some reason something that policymakers don't like to talk about. And I think it's because they can't talk about it, because then it becomes something that's like an educational specialism and they don't really know about education, do they? They're just like, you know, making pronouncements about education. So, you know, the whole thing's just weirdly dysfunctional.